in Photoshop. Let's do, yeah. You're just literally going to grab the movie file, the MOV. We're going to drag it down into Photoshop. Photoshop's going to open. And what it will have is, since it's a video, it's going to open in its motion window. If you go to Workspaces under Window, and I've shown you how to reset things back to photography, today we're going to be working in motion because this is basically an animation. We're going to be making a motion file. And you see here is the file I just dragged in. And it's a pretty simple set. It's just some flatware on a table with a specular highlight moving across it. I just took a light and waved it over the set, basically. So is that showing up in your screen, or is it too subtle?
I can see it.
You saw that? Okay. So what we need to do is decide what part of our clip we want to use as our GIF, as our cinemagraph. So I'm thinking, obviously, I'm going to start here just before it starts to get bright. Right? And I'm going to take the trim tool and slide it over. See what I'm doing? I'm cutting off the head of this clip. The information is still there, and we're going to need that head later, but it jumps over, and now I have the beginning of my clip where I want to start the cinemagraph. And right there is pretty much where I want it to end. The smaller the clip, the smaller the file, and the sooner it's going to upload if you put it into a website or share it. So once again, boom, that's all I want. So now I'm going to take my trim tool. We're going to pull the end of it, right? It's going to snap. Now, because I'm using a much smaller clip, I'm going to zoom in on this. At the bottom, there's a zoom tool that allows me to make the clip bigger. Okay, so all we've done so far is we've opened up a single movie file in Photoshop, and we've trimmed it off the front and the back, and we know we have extra footage in front, which is important because I'll show you why in a minute. We're going to use that to help us make a dissolve. And now I have a clip. It's just going to keep repeating forever. If yours isn't repeating forever, you click on this little gear icon and then click loop playback down here. That will just loop whatever selection you have. Any questions so far? Just bring it in, make your selection, make sure you have some at the front end. It's very important. And a little bit at the back end, not as important, but the front is very important. Now, what we're going to do is something we've done when we talked about layers before. You see how this is a video group 1 right here? This is just like a layer in Photoshop, but it's a movie. So we can drag this group down to the plus sign, which will duplicate the layer. Of course, there'll be no difference because the top layer is at 100% and it's going to block the bottom layer. But what we want to do for a loop is have the beginning of this clip be the same as the beginning of the next. In other words, the end of this clip is where this clip starts. So to do that, I just drag the bottom clip to the end. Now, we're not there yet, but if you see what happens here, it's just a complete loop. Right? And it's a pretty basic loop, but what we want to do is make sure it dissolves before it reaches the end, so that by the time we get to this point, the top is 0 and the bottom is 100%. Because you remember we've talked about opacity, which we find over here in our layers, right? Opacity. We're going to take this and we're going to start it at 100, and at one point we want it to be 0. So what we can do in motion, and this will become very important when you start video editing, is we can create keyframes. When we twirl down the video group copy, it starts to show us a few things that we can alter through time. And what we want to change here is going to be opacity. So we can say at this point, and I'm picking it randomly over here, it doesn't matter too much. I'm going to put a keyframe in. I'm going to click the little clock icon, and there's my keyframe, which is a snapshot in time. So at this stage, my opacity is 100%. The way it is over here, 100%. Now I'm going to move my timeline forward. I'll just pick this point for now, and I'm going to put another keyframe in. And now nothing has changed, but I'm going to take my opacity down to 0. So you'll be able to see here, over time, this frame is going to just disappear. And what happens is by the time it disappears, my other frame isn't there yet. So it disappears to nothing. So we're going to drag our keyframe to the end. So now I know at the end of this frame, there's no more of our top layer 1 showing. And this is where that extra header on our clip is important, because we're just going to slide it over. I'm going to slide it over just about past where the keyframe is. So now what will happen is it's basically going to just dissolve. All right, so we're looking pretty good, and that's going to be our loop for our GIF. But now comes the part where we're able to mask out areas that we don't want to move. And in this case, the set isn't really moving, but we can still save a lot of information by doing a mask on only the area we want to have moving. And the way we do that is just the same way we would do a mask in a regular single frame image. What we're going to do is we're going to make a stamp copy of everything. In other words, a layer that is a copy of all the layers underneath it. It's called making a stamp copy. And the way we do that is by holding the Command, Option, Shift, and E keys. Okay, Command, Option, Shift, and E. And what that's done is it's put a still layer on top of everything. And of course, nothing is happening because it's a still layer at 100%. It's going to block out everything that's below it. So let's trim this back down to our other clip so we don't have a whole lot of extra stuff going on. And as I'm sure you might be able to guess, since we've talked about merging layers before, I'm going to put a mask layer over layer 2. And here it goes. Boom. I click on the mask icon down here, and it gives me a white mask, which means everything is showing through on this layer. But we want to paint out with black, just like we do when we're doing merging single layers. Make sure your paintbrush is 100% black, and we're at the paintbrush, and then we can start painting. And if you look at the mask, it starts to show us where we've been painting. Just going to paint, and I can use the bracket bars to make my brush a little smaller. And I'm kind of just freehanding this so you guys can see quickly what we're doing. So now I have painted out this area of the spoon, the handle, and the end of the spoon. So now Oh, I've got to trim my bottom layer to the end of these other clips. So we'll just keep on keeping on. So there it goes, right? See that just the spoon is doing the reflection now? Now we'll go back to our mask. Make sure the mask is highlighted. See with these white lines around it. And I'll bring in, make my brush a little bigger, we'll bring in the knife. And we'll bring in the butter knife. And we'll bring in the fork. Cool. And now we'll see what we got. My fork didn't seem to paint in very well, did it? There we go. Boom. And you see here where there's a representation of what's been masked to show. Now they're all doing their thing. So now we have that, we need to get it out of Photoshop. And the way we do that is we go into File, Export, Save for Web. And what that's giving me is a representation of what we're going to get an output. But right now it's really way too big. I don't need it to be a full HD image at 1920 by 1080. I'm going to take it down to like a 500 pixel width. And you can experiment with this in terms of finding a size that works for wherever you're posting it. But at 500 pixels, boom, it's going to be under a meg. Some settings that might not be set for you when you get in here. I did this recently, so it was. You want to save it as a GIF or a GIF, depending on how you pronounce it. You want to make sure that you have a dither set so that it looks smoother, and I choose diffusion. Preview monitor color is fine. Looping is another important one down here. If you want it to continuously loop, you've got to pick forever. And then if you click preview, I don't know. Are you guys seeing the preview here? It's in another window.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a preview of what it's going to look like when you export it. And that's looking pretty groovy. It opens up in your browser. And then we click save. Then we give it a name. We'll call this test GIF 1. And we'll make sure I put it on the desktop. Click save. And we go to our desktop. Let's go over here, do it this way. So here's our GIF. If I hit the space bar, it will give me a preview of it. Or I can just drag it into a web browser, which I can't see because of my Zoom window. I'll scoot you over there. Come back over here. Drop it into my Safari. And there it is in the web browser doing its thing. And that's it. That's how you make a GIF. Any questions? We'll do another one real quick so you can see the whole process again. But what do you think? Inspired anyone? You want to try it?
Yeah.
I'd rather have a snack. That makes sense? Heidi? Kevin?
I'll turn all my photos into GIFs from now on. Everything. All my 250,000 images.
It's great if you have some video clips. Yeah.
No, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. So we'll do one more, and then I'll we'll see if you guys are ready to try it, or if it's just not that interesting. So what do I have here? I have a really I shot cinamagraph. Let's try the turntable. I just shot that yesterday. So here is a very jerky movie, because I had it on a very flimsy tripod and I just threw it in there very quickly. So again, doesn't matter because I don't need the whole thing. We're going to drag our turntable movie, just drag it down into Photoshop. That's one way. Or you could actually, on a Mac, right-click it and tell it to open with Photoshop, but it doesn't believe that it can. So we're just going to do it either dragging it in or Command 0, which is Command Open from inside Photoshop. And then we can work our way around to where it lives and open it that way. Easier just to drag it down into the icon. So first thing, what do we do? Someone tell me. Francis, what do we do? You're muted.
Okay, sorry. All right, so you have to trim the clip such
Right.
that there's a loop playback.
Very good. And we kind of want to find a place where it begins and ends. So we could just kind of pick the part where the record label, and yes, it's Dark Side of the Moon, is pointing, no, it isn't, pointing to pure right, more or less, right? We'll pick that. And then we'll trim this to that point. Boom. And then we'll pick our endpoint. So we're watching that label go around, it's going around, it's going around. My hand gets in there. What a disaster. Okay, maybe I need to start earlier. So we're going to start just around here where the label is pointing down at the tone arm. We'll just do a little trim right there. It's not letting me work it, so I'm going to zoom in a little more, and then I'm going to trim it. Boom. So at the beginning, it's at the tone arm. Do I have enough to get around? I do, right? So now it's at the tone arm again. So that was one complete rotation of our record. Zoom this back out so I can trim the end. Boom. So now there's just a little jumping in there. This is why having a good tripod is important. I kind of kicked this one. I really just threw it up this morning to have another rough thing to show you. So now what do we do next? Richard.
Duplicate it.
Correct. We will now duplicate.
Another layer.
Very good. We will duplicate it. Now what the mistake you might make is to drag layer 1 down. You really want to make sure you just drag the whole video group down. So you choose video group 1 and you bring it down to the plus, and that duplicates our layer. There we go. So now we have one over the other. What do we do next? Anyone? Bueller? Remember, we want the beginning here to start again at the end here.
Move the bottom clip to the end of the first one.
Correct. We bring it right over there.
And now you need to make opacity keyframe.
Exactly. So let me zoom in on these clips using the slider at the bottom here. And this time, before I make the keyframes, I'm just going to stretch my clip over to the side a bit. Now, I really didn't leave myself a whole lot of room for the keyframes because I didn't have enough header, but I'll just zoom in and we'll make it work. So at the beginning of this clip, at the bottom, we're going to put in the keyframe on our group 1 on the top using the opacity. And then at the end, or almost the end, we'll drag it over. This just makes it a little easier to work. We'll throw another keyframe in, and we're going to change our opacity down to 0. And then I'll just drag this to the end. Now, the interesting thing, if you watch the opacity, as I move it across, you'll see it starts at 100 and it goes down to 60, 40. It's automatically doing the math to ease it out till you reach the end clip. All right, computer is gummed up a bit, but this should, there it goes. So now it's going on and on. It's pretty seamlessly, you know. The dissolve is very hard to see. Now it's rocking and rolling all over the place, and this is where, when we come in here and we do our layer, it's going to help the next, it's going to help minimize all that movement. So what do we do next, guys? We make a stamp layer. How do we do it? Who remembers the keyboard combination?
Me.
All right, what is it?
Command Option Shift E.
Right, and if you can't remember that, just Google Photoshop stamp layers and magic will happen. It will tell you. So Command Option Shift E. Now I have that layer. It happened to start at the end of my playhead, so I need to drag it back to the beginning. And we can zoom out a bit here. Zoom, yeah, literally zoom out so it comes in. And we'll clip our top layer off to the end of our second track. It snaps right into there when you get close. So now we have an absolutely not moving image. Terrific, all that work for nothing. What do we do? Who knows, other than Francis and
The
Richard?
layer mask on.
Right.
My bad.
It's all right. Kevin, do you remember what I do next?
Do you mask it? Or
I do. Excellent. Yes.
Uh,
We create the mask. Boom. And there is a mask that does nothing until we draw. And since I was kind of thinking about the label, we're just going to paint black and make sure we're not painting black on the image, which I always trip myself up. Make sure you're in the mask. And now I'm just going to paint black in here. Now I can see that I'm painting with a really hard brush. Command Z. I'm going to right click on the brush and make sure it's soft. So it's a more subtle fall off. So to start, I'm just going to pick the label here, and then we're going to hit play. Now again, I wasn't exactly perfect. There is some camera movement, but it doesn't look quite as bad here as it did when we saw the whole thing bouncing around, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the second layer, does it matter like where you put it at the end? Like, you know how you have like a specific amount that you put it like a little, I don't know how to put this. Like,
Are you asking about how much of a dissolve you need between one and the other?
yeah. Like,
It doesn't need to be a lot.
okay.
Experiment. The less you can get away with, the better. It's like a dissolve. Do you want a fast dissolve or a slow dissolve? And by dissolve, I mean, when you see a movie and it goes from one scene to the next, there's a dissolve. And it can be slow, it can dissolve to black or fade to black. Or it can dissolve from morning to night with the same scene. You can decide how long you want that dissolve to be.
Okay.
Experiment with it. You can't, I mean, if it's too short, it'll be jumpy. If it's too long, it'll be like, I can't believe this GIF is so long, nothing's happening. So As long as it feels like it's happening fairly quickly, you're in good shape. Okay, so our GIF is done. What do we do next?
We save and
Yes, we
export.
export it. We export it, not just save it, we export it. And we're going to export it as,
Web.
yes, boom. This may take a minute because it's a bigger file than the other one, but spinny wheel, spinny wheel. See, in the final edit, this will just take a minute. We'll cut this out. But since we're dealing in real time, I'll tell you a joke about 3 dogs that walk into a bar. 3 dogs walk into a bar. God, I wish that hurries up because I don't have the rest of the joke. Spinny wheel, spinny wheel. It's doing a lot of math. Anyway, while this is doing that, you guys kind of get it? You think, can you think of a repeated motion that you might try by next week to do one? Because that's the assignment. I want you to make a GIF. A cinemagraph GIF. Yes, my computer has decided it doesn't like zooming and processing image files. So if it, oh, there it is, hooray. Well, that's why, because this is a larger camera chip than the other one I showed you, it's almost 200 megabytes. So right away, we want to make we'll make it 500 pixels wide tab. And this will, again, will take a minute to resize. And then you click save. So if it comes through, that's great. Otherwise, your assignment is to do a cinemagraph of whatever inspires you. And if you have any questions, you can text or email me and I will get back to you on it. Okay? Lauren, did that make sense? As someone who was curious about it? Oh, there it is.
Wait,
Yes.
Adam.
You know, you guys who knows more of this.
It's something I'm just going to have to do on my own
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
to grasp, but it makes sense.
Cool. And here is the spinning cinemagraph on its own. Ta-da. All right. Kevin, what will our checkout question be?